Alex Howard here at the Government 2.0 Summit in Washington, and with me I have Jules Polonetsky, the former Chief Privacy Officer at AOL and currently the Director of the Future of Privacy Forum. Nice to have you here.
Great to be with you.
So one of the issues that's really foremost here at the summit is this issue of privacy. You'll be speaking about that tomorrow. What, in your estimation, does privacy mean to Government 2.0?
You know, I almost hate using this term privacy, which is strange as the director of the Future of Privacy Forum, but you know, our think tank, which is chief privacy officers of companies that use data, and then advocates and academics who are concerned about how data is used, have, I'd say, kind of a moderate and maybe interesting perspective. To most people, privacy means things are secret, things are hidden, things are not used. But talk to most businesses or talk to government, and they want to know how they can use your data. So I'd like to think about responsible data use. I'd like my bank to keep things secret, but I want government to keep certain things secret. But when it comes to Gov 2.0, it's where can the government use my data, everyone's data, to make it more accessible, to make it useful, to make it a feature that's valuable for me. And that's a real problem solver. When I'm surprised by how data is being used, when I think it's being used against me, or that there's something secretive going on, or that it's being used to market to me, or analyze me, or profile me, sure, I'm upset about it and I want my privacy. When I see my data being used for me, even to sell me something, right? People love Amazon, they love Netflix. They get that someone's making some money off what's going on there, but they also get that it's for their benefit. And government has no choice, I think, when it comes to using citizens' data to make it clear that what's being done is for your benefit. So how do you do that? Privacy policies, I think there's broad consensus, certainly in the academic community, in the advocacy community, and a lot of the more progressive businesses, that privacy policies have nothing to do with telling people how their data is being used. It's there, it's important, it explains what's going on. But if this is a feature, it's got to be something that is a feature. And a feature means I see it, I get it, I can tweak it, I can turn it off, I can make it better. So the challenge for government is how can we featureize data use so that Americans, and so citizens and anyone who's web surfing, doesn't feel tracked by the government, doesn't feel analyzed, but feels, hey, I'm in charge of what's going on here, right? If that's what 2.0 means, Web 2.0 could be the solution, and Gov 2.0 could really drive privacy solutions by giving people some insight, some value, some understanding by making data use a valuable feature.
So there's a balance or trade-off, perhaps, between how we open up data, how we share things about ourselves, and then the societal benefit that comes from that. And you can see some of those same issues rise in terms of how we think about financial data and data mining there. You can see it when you think about healthcare data. There's been any number of studies which imply that you could certainly gather a great deal of societal benefit if some of the really quite onerous and specific privacy restrictions around the use of it were considered in such a way to try to anonymize the data, to understand the larger scope of what's happening. What are some of the undercurrents, though, with respect to how the regulation around that is changing? Something that has been a really hot topic here in Washington, and not just around the social networking space, which has attracted the attention, but around information brokers or credit reports, which all now have the ability to aggregate much more information about our lives than ever before. How are things changing at that level?
You know, for a generation, the Europeans in their privacy law have had this notion of proportionality. If I give data for some reason, for a social network, for government interaction, for something I'm buying, what are the kinds of uses that a company or that a government can make of that data, and where are the boundaries on that data? So perhaps I understand that when I visit a website or I do a search, well, that data is going to be analyzed to improve the results, to tailor perhaps my advertising there. Do I expect that it'll be used elsewhere? Well, maybe if you're clear and you tell me. Do I expect that it'll be used in some completely strange way? There is a company that was proposing, for instance, using your friends list to help determine whether or not banks should market certain credit offers to you. So the next time someone friends me, not only got to think, hey, do I know this person well? Do I want to be their friend? Do I have to think, I wonder whether they're deadbeats, because that could ruin my rating. That's beyond. There may be some benefit to society there. I'm sure it makes for efficient marketing. But there's got to be some boundary. It's interesting and useful that Google flu trends can help hospitals predict and get ready for what's coming and staff up or whatever the needs are. And clearly you can see advances in science and medicine that are going to be enabled by access to data. The question is, what can you do to ensure people that the things they worry about, my information is going to be disclosed to the wrong person, I'm going to be discriminated against, I'm going to be treated differently. And I think you can solve those things by, does this data need to be kept forever? Maybe I need to keep this data for a long period of time. Today, for some companies, or sometimes for government, the default is keep it forever because there might be some benefit one day. If there's something we're aware of, or there's something we're thinking about, so perhaps I ought to keep that data for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but perhaps not forever, because that's what creates a risk of it being released, of it being re-identified. So I'd like to take that European notion, which we sometimes deride the Europeans as being, too rigid on data rules, and bring a bit of a proportionality. Logging everything, everywhere, all the time, which is the default sometimes in government and sometimes in business, creates huge risks, creates security concerns, creates privacy concerns. If we can think about, there's some real value here, let's let some people turn it off. Maybe this is really sensitive stuff that could fall in the wrong hands, so let's maybe not go there unless we really have something defined. So I think the challenge is doing the hard work to determine what you need when, being clear to users about it, and you end up, I think, resolving a lot of these concerns.
So one of the things that the current administration's IT executives have wanted to do is to provide an online experience that at least starts to catch up with some of the advances you can see in the private sector. Vivek Kunja, the CIO, has talked about making government websites more like Amazon. Of course, if you go to Amazon, there are all sorts of things that this site, and it's really a vast array of services behind that front face, knows about you, right down to your browsing behavior, what you just looked at. And it does that through cookies. Now, for those who are watching the government space, they know that the Office of Management and Budget recently changed its cookie policy. For decades past, they weren't allowed to use cookies. Now, in theory, they could if they made a strong enough business case, but by default, that meant no cookies. Now they do.
So the way that policy developed was, I was the chief privacy officer at DoubleClick before my AOL days, and one of our clients was using cookies for a lot of its customers, including the White House drug czar, who wanted to know whether the ads they were buying on, at those days, Lycos and AOL and Yahoo were working. They had set up a site to teach teens not to use drugs, and they were measuring which ads were giving the government value for its dollar. An advocate discovered a nefarious web bug on the government site, and the instant policy within days that came out of OMB was no cookies. The government webmasters freaked out, and that was nuanced to be no permanent cookies without the approval of the secretary of the agency, and then later, because nobody was getting these on the agenda of the secretary, or their designee. And so the policy that actually has been in place for a number of years is use cookies and be unaware of the policy and then get caught and in trouble when the GAO or somebody audit it, or start working with some vendor who tries to do some measurement, realize there's a reg, and then spend 8 months trying to get it on the agenda of the senior official. Can you imagine talking to your director when you're at a government agency and saying, listen, the next meeting with our senior leader where we're asking about our budget and our 3 major priorities for the year, could you spend an hour talking about cookies, explaining to them how they work and why we need them for this little project? And so it was chaos. We urged the agency, the GAO and OMB, to update this policy when we launched, because we thought at the Future Privacy Forum, here you have the Obama administration coming in, understanding the value of data, coming in with a robust, web experience. And here you had lots of agencies that were eager to do more but needed to catch up. But what we thought was that this was a chance for the government to lead, to say, we're going to use cookies, we're going to use analytics to provide citizens with the best experience, to let them customize. And so we said, do it, but in a way that shows leadership. And I think they're on that path. I don't think it's done yet. You can use cookies without taking the off-the-shelf implementations that a lot of the web companies have, many which were built to scale without necessarily a big regard for privacy, with a focus on turning data into behavioral advertising data, turning data into data that can be sold on ad exchanges. Some companies have, over the last couple of years, because of large clients who've wanted to be more careful, who've said to their analytics companies, for instance, why are you keeping all my data forever? Are you doing anything with it? No. Well, then why do you keep it forever? I have a policy now about data retention for all my other data. Could you throw it out? A couple of the analytics companies can do that. Others are, well, I'm sorry, we build our platform for everybody. We're not making any changes. The government has an opportunity to say, we want to do this, but we would like our vendor to not keep the data of who visits the IRS forever, not keep the data who visits, National Institutes of Health forever. There's a chance to say, maybe we don't need a permanent cookie here, maybe we need a session cookie here. There's opportunity to give users better opt-outs. Today, it's typical for companies who do analytics or to do behavioral advertising to offer people an opt-out. And the dirty secret is that the opt-out doesn't well work, right? If you delete your cookies, people that are technical understand, well, of course, you deleted your opt-out cookie, you're back in. Tell the average user that you opted out because you wanted more privacy. Then you did another good privacy thing. You deleted your cookies. Sorry, you're going to be profiled again. The government has a chance to say, I'm sorry, when we offer people a choice, please turn off the cookies because you're a little bit more sensitive. It doesn't really work. Users end up being back in. Ask the vendors who are capable of advancing these solutions to do so. When accessibility became a priority for government agencies, Section 528 of the Americans with Disabilities Act said, you got to make websites accessible. And so an entire industry was built and the technical capacity started being developed. And today you've got, certainly not perfection, but you have sites putting on alt tags, doing all kinds of things to interact better with screen readers. The government has a chance in its 2.0 implementations of tracking tools, of personalization tools, to help drive an agenda which a lot of leading companies are eager to embrace as well. Now, the government does need to draw some lines. Cass Sunstein, the head of OIRA, the government, the division of OMB that helps review rules and regs and has a say over these policies as well, in a previous life wrote a really interesting book where he showed that as we read the same blogs and as we talk to our friends, as things are personalized for us in our media consumption, we end up being more and more extreme in our point of view. It is important to have some general experience, to have some community of knowledge. The government should help me find what I want, but the government should be a little slower than commercial websites in saying, here's the homepage of the White House that you're going to get based on your web surfing history. Here's what the IRS thinks people like you would want to see. Cool if Amazon's doing that for me. I may want to choose the better version of the site. What did other people who selected this form select? Maybe the IRS has some point of view that if I've made one sort of filing, I better make another, or maybe they can find a balance. So I think they need to be a bit cautious in that this is the official government view of the world, and that doing too much, help me, give me a shopping cart, help me find the things I may want to find, but we do need to have some understanding that when it comes to profiling, when it comes to what other agencies may have access to that data. Some of the things that they did in their policy are very useful. For instance, data from one agency shouldn't be aggregated with the same cookie across other agencies. That's useful. That prevents there from being this one giant, government web surfing profile. So I think they're on the right path.
Okay. Last question. There's a lot of discussion about whether the generations have different attitudes towards privacy. Certainly, you can see there are different norms in terms of how people interact when they're present in person. If I were talking with a cousin who was 10 years younger, we might both be on our cell phones, and that would be okay. If I were to be talking with my grandmother, that would be very rude, potentially. But we're all kind of stumbling through this space. And one of the areas that's very much true is the sense of how much we share of ourselves to the broader world online and our awareness of what that means. Do you see, as in your work, and you've looked deeply at this, a shift in how people in the United States think about privacy, or a broader shift around the world?
You know, here's what's happening, which is really interesting. Professor Joseph Turow and Chris Hufnagel at Berkeley did a big behavioral advertising study where they showed that teens do care as much as the older generation about privacy, but were uncomfortable or less sophisticated about using privacy settings. A more recent study came out from Pew, which was really interesting, and it showed that across all generations, users are actually getting better at managing privacy settings, at making decisions about what they share and what they didn't. And guess what? It wasn't because the government lectured them or because industry taught them something or they read about privacy. They're using these tools. They Google each other. They then realize, oh, this stuff is out there about me. Maybe I want to think about this. They find out about their dates and their friends via looking at social media profiles. And so they're like, oh, I can see their pictures. Maybe they can see mine. Maybe I want to just think. And so what Pew found was that there's been a big increase in across all ages, and particularly across the younger generation. The early adopters, the younger adopters are using the technology long enough now that they're becoming aware of data about them out there because of how they use it, and are therefore taking some greater control over it. Globally, there certainly are some discrepancies. You know, you've got street protests in Germany about certain uses of data. You have people attacking the Google Earth vehicles, or viscerally taking action in a way that you don't see in the U.S. You know, some of the European countries have good memories of the Holocaust and how databases were used to track down who was Jewish, who was gay, who belonged to a certain party, and so it's in the Constitution and it's in the culture. But hey, Facebook profiles, you know, the adoption across countries around the world, you know, I think, what is it, 70% of their audience is outside the U.S. Clearly, connecting is something that's universal. Wanting to share, wanting to express yourself is universal. And the challenge for governments and the challenge for industry is, how do we embrace that? But how do we show users that they are in control? It's trivial to say, well, just ask them and let them opt into everything. And that's often the privacy advocate answer. But that doesn't leave you any opportunity for privacy experimentation or data experimentation. If you had asked me, would you like Facebook to turn on the news feed, or should you ask someone each time before they blast out to all their friends that they've made a minor change to their profile? Most of us, whether a privacy advocate or, would have said, oh yeah, don't just do that. And they turned it on, and we all got upset. And then we kind of said, oh, look at what my friends are doing. That's really useful and that's really interesting. But it was obvious to me that it was on. And so I could see how my data was being used, and I could adjust and understand it. And so the challenge for this opt-in, opt-out debate, or this challenge for whether you can experiment with new data use features or with new privacy features is, can you make it easy and obvious? If I get that it's for me, I'll give you license to use my data for me. But if, whether you're business or government, if I think it's for you and solely for you, that you're tracking me or selling me as opposed to serving me, then I'm going to reject it. So in some strange way, the answer to some of the privacy debate is more data. Today I get tracked online, I don't see a difference. I got to be pretty smart to know that an ad is being tailored for me. Make it visible, make it useful, and I may actually, and hey, maybe give me some control over it, and I may actually let you make a lot of money or use the data in the way that benefits me, the government, business, and society.
Sounds like getting close to a privacy bill of rights, so to speak.
A responsible data use bill of rights, let's call it.
Well, I don't expect the debate anytime soon. I know that you'll be talking more about privacy tomorrow here at the summit, and I look forward to hearing more as the debate moves forward, both here in Washington and abroad.